Thank you for inviting us. Content folks, my name is Sarah Winters. I am the founder of an agency called Content Design London, and I'm the co-author of the book Content Design, along with my colleague Rachel.
I think that's my cue. Hello, I'm Rachel, and I'm a senior content designer at Content Design London, and I had the great fun of working with Sarah on the revised edition of Content Design, which came out at the end of May. And thank you very much for having me back today.
Okay, so today we are going to talk about how when things, being the environment or things around you, are moving fast, content can too, and in a lot of organizations that will be true. In some organizations though, particularly if you're working in a glacial place, it cannot feel like that. So we're going to give you a couple of things today for you to get on top of now in case everything moves quickly. Now, if you're already in an organization that's beautiful, and you do everything really quickly and really well, then the image on the screen will mean nothing to you. So, but if you are in an environment where everything is on fire, you're in a crisis, whatever that is, by the way, whatever that is, some people will simply put their underpants on the outside, pull them up to their armpits, pop on a cape, and then they will panic publish everything. There is a way to get around this. We know that a lot of change is coming here in the UK. Of course, we've got an election in 2 days. Are we going to end up with another government or not? How is that going to go? What is that going to mean? COVID, pretty sure that wasn't the last one. And obviously, we've got a lot of conflicts around the world. It does mean that organizations need to move quickly. And just panic publishing PDFs is not really it. There is another way if you're already doing that. So the first step on this is your governance. And by governance, I mean who does what. And generally, governance is the first thing to go when everybody is panic publishing, right? So this could be very normal for you, or it could be very suddenly. You'll go from like one person seeing things, and it could be a very calm workflow like this one, where somebody writes something. Occasionally there's a bit of an edit. It might go round a few times very politely, nicely, quickly, that sort of thing. And then it will be published, and it could be gorgeous, right? And it's all in calming colors, and it could be gorgeous. Or it could be like this, which is a complete mess. Now, in a crisis, you might as well just add flames to the complete mess, because people get skipped or they get jumped over, or you have suddenly 500 people in the process that weren't in there 2 weeks ago, or you have one very important person in the process and they become a bottleneck. So what we would recommend at this stage is map your current governance. Now, you can do this with people or without. Now, you might be looking at me and going, but Sarah, content design is a team sport. And we never do anything without anybody else. What I would say to you, particularly now and when you're in a crisis, is pick your battles. So you are content. We all know how this works. You're going to get it from all angles, all sides, all kinds of opinions. And you need to take care of you, because whatever is going on for you as well. So what we would say is pick your battles. Work out what is the most important thing for you. So it could be some of the basics that you're just not going to let go of, right? So whatever gets published, for example, it has to be accurate. Now, that seems like such a bog standard thing to say, and it's so simple, but actually we saw in the pandemic that accuracy can last for about 10 minutes. There were organizations that remain nameless that used to, through the pandemic, were pumping out the same PDF, over 100 pages on this thing, the same PDF up to 94 times in 1 week, and not telling everybody what was different on it. So whilst you can sit there and say, yes, I'm absolutely not let going of accuracy, what you might want to do is say accuracy and showing people what that accuracy is. So there are nuances, and it will be different for every organization. I also don't think it is a bad thing to say, I'm going to prioritize these hard-won relationships. That has taken me years to build up. And if I go in going, you see that? No, we're having none of it. If that breaks it, that is not worth it. So often we do something called the 80-20 rule, which is so long as it's 80% there, 20% you can get to later, as long as it is something, whatever it is that's on your list. So again, it could be IA, could be journey map, it could be accessibility in general, could be duplication, it could be whatever. That'll be for you to decide. But we would recommend that you have that before you go into your governance. Content will continue long after your crisis has calmed down, and it will be there for you to fix. We've seen a lot of colleagues burn out, and we've seen a lot of colleagues leave the industry, leave the content industry, because of the amount of pressure that you're on. So what I would say is put your personal pants and cape away, work out the top 3, 5 things that you're absolutely not going to let go. And the rest of it, you need to become recovering perfectionists to really stay safe and to stay in the industry and do really good work for however long that crisis works for. So once you've got that and you're mapping your governance, that's what I mean about you can do it with or without your stakeholders. It might be safer and easier for you to do it by yourself, or you could do it how we would normally do content design as a team sport with other people. The other thing is that it absolutely has to be realistic. What I would not say in a crisis, if you have a governance model, is that you go from having 32 people in a process to 2. Because it's unlikely you're going to get that through. If you think you can, go for it, absolutely. And would you mind blogging about it afterwards, please? But make it realistic. Then you have to ask the 2 hard questions. Can you change it? Because the answer may be no. And then what do you need to get it changed? And some of that may be that you need your bosses to say yes, or you may just need to go around and see certain people in the organization and say, look, we know change is coming. If that happens in a content strategy, if you've got one, I would propose an emergency governance now. So if you get this sort of thing sorted out now, if and when anything happens, you can just slide it into place. I say that as if it's very easy. We all know it's not going to be that easy, but you can get it into place. Shall we say that instead? For some of the governance, what we would say is the fewest people possible. Now, generally, when I'm doing content strategy workshops, I would say if you have more than 5 people in your governance, your workflow and governance process, you've got too many. There is something wrong with your process if you've got more than 5 in it. That can be very different for you, but I would still say fewest. Pair writing and crits are simply the fastest way of getting content up that I know about. Unless, of course, you're left alone or your colleagues are brilliant and just trust you undeniably, in which case you live in utopia. What can I say? And when I say who really, in bold, needs to know that, again, this is something that you can do by yourself or you can do with your stakeholders, but who really needs to know what? Because a lot of people will say, I need to know X, X, and X. And it's like, it's brilliant, but you've got this job over here. Everything is going to be flying at you too. Are you going to have time to see that all my sentences are fewer than 24 words? Unlikely. So who really needs to see it? And I say, what can you skip, not who, because who would be rude. But what steps can you skip? Put it all down. Be quite harsh. Think about it. Think about the fact that maybe, I don't know, you've got 2 hours a day to get something out. What would be the bare minimum and then what would be the perfect scenario? And then take that around the organization and just decide what's right for you. Okay, next is user needs, as you know. Usually these are in user stories or in job stories, as I want to so that, or when I want to so that. I'm sure you all know this. What we would recommend is that you prioritize them. Now, again, accuracy, purely because if things are wrong, people are going to go wrong. And tempers flare, don't they? And if your brain is on 50 other things, you're going to want to find things easily and you want it to be right first time. Not that you don't ordinarily, but you definitely do on this one. You may decide to go with dates, applications, deadlines, things like that. That may be your top priority, or indeed just go for a top task model, like Jerry McGovern teaches, and just choose your top 20 things. If you don't already run your organization off user needs, you can just choose your priorities and work off of those. Just make sure that they're done. What we would also say is that we can run a whole organization off of one bank of user needs. In doing that, if you fulfill the need once, then there is a lot less to update, and Rachel's going to talk about that a bit later. In terms of damage, particularly if you need one behind, or if there is a conflicting need or whatever, if you've done it once, that the damage limitation is much greater. You will also find that your audience is more likely to do it. If they have to go to multiple sources, and have to read again and again and again, they are likely to get fatigue. And we often see a drop in engagement at that point. So what we would say is do it once and do it well. Now, if you're sitting there and you're saying, but I can't, Sarah, I'm a single content designer in a massive organization and I couldn't possibly do user needs for everything. Gotcha. Yes, you can. So this is an example and it's on the website. This is the URL on the left-hand side there. This is on the website. We ran a project in COVID that opened it up to the world and asked them for their user needs. Now, the user needs and crisis is something when needs versus wants really comes out. And the needs were the same everywhere. How am I going to get fed? What do I do if I can't go to work? What do I do if I'm sick? Those sorts of things. It doesn't matter what country you're in, unless it's a country that wasn't affected by it or did it completely differently, aka ignoring it. The needs were exactly the same. So what we would invite you to do actually is maybe work together. There are LinkedIn groups, there's the content chat, there's various Slack groups going on. Get together, work as an industry. It can be done. Take a look at that URL. It's on the blog, and see how we did it, because you're not alone. We work in a massive industry and we're all gorgeous, aren't we? Friendly and just fabulous and generous. There is no reason, I don't think, while you lot in your perfect sectors can get together and start producing this. And then you've got all the things that you need there to prioritize and get your governance sorted out so that when everything horrible hits the fan, you, as a content designer, even a lone content designer, you're already 10 steps ahead. Journey mapping then. I'm sure you probably all do this anyway, but for those of you who don't, journey maps are a way of looking at how people go through a product or a service or a journey from one thing to the end, basically. It's in the book. We have blog posts on it if you'd like to see it in more detail. Now, again, journey maps, very important because they change during a crisis. Now, you probably saw it, or you can probably work it out. Now, what there is usually is a massive gap between what the organization thinks is happening and what is really happening. So if you can do even 5 journey maps on your top tasks now, your top 5 things that people go to you for, and just work out who is getting to you, where they're coming in, what sorts of things they're doing, they will fall into the rhythm of, I'm going to find something, I'm going to do something, I'm going to get something. Even if the getting thing is information, it's still a getting something. If you can put those journeys together, when a crisis hits, you already have something to go to. You already have an idea about what used to happen. So if you do have some time for user research, then you will be able to move a lot faster because you have a benchmark. And if you don't, then at least you know that you're getting the right people at the right time at the moment. And then you can play around with it later. And again, to keep banging on, you're not alone. You're an industry. There is no reason, I don't think, that you couldn't, if you wanted to, share it as an industry. I know we got leaders in there. I know. Sort it out, have a chat with each other, get together, come up with the user journey so that you are better off. I'm just going to stop sharing so Rachel can take over.
Thank you so much. This is always the hardest. Okay, does that look like it should? Yes, excellent. Right. So we're kind of giving you 5 tools here that you can take with you as you're trying to navigate this content in a fast changing environment. And number 4, which in no particular order, because this is one of my favorites, user research. And when things move quickly, your first thought is probably not to stop and do user research because, face it, it takes time. Sometimes it takes a lot of time. But we need to remember that formal user research interviews are just one technique to use. And in the book, we talk a lot about different desk research that you can do. And some of the things only take a few minutes. So the 2 I would focus on here are the top 2 on the list, Google Trends and mental models. And I would say that these can be done in a couple of hours if that's all you have. And if you think you don't have a couple of hours, try and find it because the time you put into this is going to be hugely beneficial and it will probably help you move faster. Because in a fast moving situation, you don't want to get into the I think versus you think way of deciding on content. What you need is evidence to make quick decisions that are going to work for your users. So slow it down, take half an hour, and do your Google work if you do nothing else. And Google research, Google Trends is a great place to start. Um, Again, if you haven't used Google Trends before, we go into a lot of detail about how to use it in the book. And this is an image from one of the searches that we did. So in the book, we talk about badgers a lot. And one of the technical badgery bits is around badger tuberculosis or BTB and badger culls. And a little poke around Google Trends showed that people just weren't searching for BTB. So if you were designing a page of content and not using the language that people were using, which is culls, your content isn't going to be found. But thinking about those real world examples and coming back to COVID, when we started with COVID, we had COVID all in capital letters, we had coronavirus, COVID-19, novel coronavirus, and it took quite a while for us to settle down and sort of agree on using COVID, which is what we widely talk about now. So the last thing that we as designers would wanted to do is to add to that noise and come up with another name. And maybe if more of this research had been done, we could have settled on that one term a bit sooner. Another one, when the term cost of living emerged, it came into use really quickly. In April 2022, it wasn't on Google Trends at all. And then in May it was. And that became our established term very, very quickly. But one organization that I was working with decided to try and put their own spin on this. They wanted to rename it, and I suggested they stick to what people were calling it. But this organization particularly didn't want to use the word crisis and cost of living crisis because they wanted to try and avoid fueling panic. And this is a nice idea, but no one was searching for their proposed term. It wasn't there at all. So we showed them the Google Trends evidence, and they ultimately decided, okay, they didn't need to put their own spin on it, because the consequence would have been have been losing a lot of people. Their information just wouldn't have been found. So once you've got an idea of the vocab, you can delve into the mental models. And mental models are about how people think and behave, and they take into account previous experiences and beliefs too. So while the words give you a starting point, taking some time to look at comments, blog posts, forums, and social media will give you an idea of what people are thinking and doing around the topic. And this can give you some great insight into the information that they're looking for and need. So for example, I've got here a screenshot of some Google search results. Who knew that there were so many concerns about when to go to the toilet during Taylor Swift's Eras Tour? But Google's people also ask questions suggest this is a top concern. And if from here you take a little dive into social media, you'll find there are whole accounts devoted to this information. So you can get this insight in a couple of minutes. And who knew? I did not. But a crisis is not the time to start educating people. In the book, when we talk about those mental models, we also bring in the 3 R's. And the 3 R's are the things that your content will do. They'll reflect someone's attitudes and beliefs, rebut them, and then, if needed, to re educate. But with fast moving crisis content, we really want to reflect and we want to be pointing people in the right direction. And to do that, you need to be using their words and understanding their mental models. So you don't want to be introducing new vocabulary or asking them to complete an additional mental task here. But if you need to save even more time in your user research section here, can you work together as an industry? As Sarah was just saying, for example, with COVID, when we were all doing the same thing, did we all need to do it separately? And maybe you can't publish your findings of your user research and share them publicly, but if your organization supports it, can you work with another one that's doing the same? Can you do user research together? Can you share and then lighten the load? You can learn a lot from doing very little. Maybe you can do that very little with a friend or a colleague in another organization, and maybe even have a bit of time for a cup of tea. So the last tool that we're going to give you here is to know your content. Know what you've got, where it is, and don't have too much. And that means you're going to be able to move a lot faster. So when situations change or things emerge, if you're working in organizations that are any like the many I've worked in, the first reaction is often, let's get a new page, or we need to create a new page. But do you? Is it the best idea to throw something new onto the site, or can you update existing content instead? Um, so if you know what you have and where it is, rather than throwing up quick content really quickly as a press release or just putting a page in a strange location because you need to get something up right now, you can keep to your structure and adapt what you already have. But this relies on you having that structure and that knowledge to begin with. And it has the benefit of keeping your search results from competing with each other too. So I don't want to pick on anyone, but if you do a little search on gov.uk for child benefit, 27,312 results come up. It's a lot of results. So what happens if theoretically you get a new government in a few days' time and they want to change the name of child benefit to, say, dependence allowance? That is a lot of content to change and to hunt down. You don't want 27,312 results because, especially when we look at these results a bit more, within these results, just a few items down from this, so still on the top page, got another section with the same name. And this information is from 9 years ago. So this is confusing. It means you've got two pieces of content very close to each other. One of them is possibly out of date, or is it? How do I know which one I want to look at? It turns out that the second is actually a list of links related to child benefit, the first of which takes me back to that first page. But I don't want to have to try and figure that out. One of my favorite things to talk about is around stress and content and what happens to us when we're stressed. Wading through information becomes even harder. Our brains just simply can't sift and filter and assess in the same way. We want clear information quickly that we can trust. So in a fast-moving situation, don't make your users work harder. Their brains are already working harder. And there's the risk. What happens if we don't delete information? You can end up with information that's in conflict with each other. I've chosen, again, you might see that I've got a current interest right now in Taylor Swift's Eras Tour. But here we've got two examples of information that a colleague received ahead of the concert in Edinburgh a few weeks ago. One was from an email and the other was on the website. And we can joke about what happens here. You can see the consequence that if you went with the website information, you would have actually missed the first hour of Taylor Swift performing. But if we think again about that COVID information, when the length of self-isolation periods, for example, kept changing, following the wrong advice can impact on someone's work, on their pay, on their childcare, on their travel arrangements, their caring responsibilities. It can have a huge effect. So if you're in an organization that doesn't like to delete, and there's a lot of those, try and map out that potential damage and show what could happen if someone gets confused by out-of-date information. And this is where we come back to that first message, which is know where your content is, and that is all your content. To do this properly, you need to know where all your content is. So don't forget about little content hidey holes, things like text messages, automated phone options, all of that is content. And here's an example, again, that a colleague got just last week. This was an automatic email response to a question to a local council about postal votes, but what is missing here? What is that key message that we're being told on all the websites around voting in this election? I won't make you turn your microphones on and pop out of your comfort, but I'm hoping you've noticed that there's nothing in here about photo ID. So there's information that's been updated all over the website, multiple pages, but it hasn't been thought to put in to here, into this email response. If you've got competing information and some of it is out of date, conflicting, you're going to lose trust and you're going to lose credibility. And if you delete the noise, you can find that one source of truth. You can find that Wally. And I actually did just find him now looking at that. I'm not going to tell you. We can come back to it if you want to look more and find Wally for yourself. But the last thing I'm going to say about this is that deleting content is good practice. The best thing you can do is to delete. So here's another example. Here's a really helpful diagram about carry-on luggage sizes. You don't need to have the information about what used to be. It's confusing and it's not going to help. Just put what is. A lot of organizations want to keep all the information that ever there was just in case, or because they use this as an internal archive and they want to be able to access a press release from 2009. Think back to that COVID information. If you had one page and it updated when the information changed, there'd be no competing internal search results. There'd be no checking dates to see which set of guidance was newer. As an organization, you're not only taking the work off the user, you're making it easier for yourselves too. So start to in the book, we say it's not more content, it's smarter content. And that's what you need if you want to be able to move quickly. But even with all of this planning, things might not go to plan, and they usually don't. I worked on an emergency communication team for years, and we practiced what we do in different situations and scenarios, but inevitably, when those scenarios actually happened, it never went to plan. So we've given you a lot of things to do, but to sort of wrap it up, here are some things you can do if you can't do anything else. You don't have to throw the whole content design book out the window. So if you can do nothing else, remember your basics. Things like short sentences, good formatting, making your information accessible, changing the upfront information, spending a few hours getting the research together you think you might need. These are going to make your information better and clearer for someone. If you can do something, try and practice pair writing and crits. Both of these will speed things up. They'll avoid the death by track changes and things just sitting in people's inboxes. Get the people in the room and make those decisions together quickly. And if you can do everything, it's great. Do this. Keep that user-centered focus. This should be the basic, but organizations can revert to old habits and old form when they're asked to move quickly. Decide at the beginning how you're going to measure your content and what success is going to look like, and establish those metrics. Review and evaluate your content, so don't just put it up there and leave it. take into account any on-page feedback, any anecdotal feedback, or user testing. And consider what you can do beyond a web page. Should you be producing leaflets for a GP office, a radio campaign, a video, additional accessible formats? And finally, after the crisis, go back. Keep a list of all the things that you've changed, added, so that you can go back when things are calmer and do that content maintenance. Review, revise, hold a retro, reflect, and breathe. I'm going to hand over to Sarah to bring us home.
So one of the very important things to remember is that you work in a whole organization unless you work entirely by yourself. And it is not just your job to stop that panic publishing. Now, a lot of people take it on themselves and they will take a lot of the negative and the criticism. You work in a whole organization. And if the governance process that perhaps you have asked to put in place wasn't put in place, it's not on you. And so again, pick your battles and just keep yourself safe. So if you remember 5 things from this, do some research. Even if you've got 2 hours, just do some, you will be further ahead. Prioritize really what's important. And again, that's up to you. Should it be important to the user, important to the organization, whatever it is, but you get to prioritize. Work together as an industry. It's full of leaders and it's full of gorgeous, lovely people. So just borrow, share, help each other out. We are not sitting on our own. Remember your basics if you can't do anything else. If you can't get through it, then don't. Look after you. We all know the basics about the, sentences, everything that Rachel has just talked about. So at least do that. And last but not least, it is not just you. And it is not just your job. So that's all we've got for you today. And there are time for some questions, I think.